Hi, my name is Dylan Straffen. I'm with Team 20 and I'm going to be doing our sprint number 2 walkthrough for you today. Just a quick reminder from last week, we are the task management and storage application. We're building an application that lets users input tasks from before and view them later on. Just a quick preface before I go over some of these sprint goals with you. We actually had to kind of change and adapt some of our sprint goals from last week just based off of how long certain implementation of things took, and so we adapted just so the application would be more usable and just made improvements that we saw would be better fitting for our second sprint. So to begin, one of the biggest things on our sprint was to create this graphical task list display for the main menu. Now that's a whole list of all the events that users have added or will add to the application, and that's viewed within the main menu. It's our main way of displaying tasks for these users, and it's the quickest and most efficient way to get this data. So it was a pretty big part of our project, and we spent a pretty long time actually building it and trying to implement it into the interface. Now it's not completely done, but we definitely took some huge steps towards finishing it this week. Secondly, a big thing for us was creating a graphical representation of a monthly calendar. Now this was super important because we thought it would be good for users who wanted to actually view all their assignments for the month. To have an easy and efficient way to do that. We think that's a good way and a favorite way of users to view things like this, much like in other similar applications. Now, our third goal, this was a bit of a smaller goal, but it was just to finish creating the interface that will allow new users to input their data. So this will make more sense when I show it later on the demo, but this is just your classic username and password account creation type of interface. Pretty essential for users and definitely something that we wanted to add earlier on rather than later. Now the next thing you'll see on our sprint list, or sprint goal list, excuse me, is to create a graphical interface to input a new task. This is essential to the workflow of our application and just the general purpose of the application. We want users to be able to add in their own task to the application, and we needed to build an interface that allowed users to do that in a simple way. So we spent some time actually designing that interface and kind of sort of implementing it into the navigation of the actual application. Next was finishing this navigation control between interfaces. This was something that kind of carried over from our first sprint and was really essential to the usability of the application. We needed users to be able to use the buttons to navigate between different interfaces within the application, and building the navigation control was essential to making that happen within our sprints. And then lastly, just making some general improvements towards usability. We found some things to be kind of confusing with our first demo of the application, so we made some changes, made some things more easy to understand for users, and that kind of is self-explanatory for its purpose, but it's just a general upgrade to the overall feel and usability of the application. Now next I'm going to be looking at some of the front-end pieces and showing you some more details related to that. So to do that, I've moved over the actual project goals for this sprint over to the right side of the screen here so you can view them while we go through this walkthrough. It'll make it a little more easy to understand. I've moved the application to the center here, but to begin we're just going to start by launching the application. Now you'll notice that we have this new user button, which is one of the main sprint goals for this week, the input interface for users to add a new account. Now if we press this button, we now have set up navigation control to bring us to this interface. This is the interface where users will actually create their accounts. Now we think this is a pretty essential part of our application to users. We want them to be able to have their own data stored, and having user accounts is an essential part of making that work. Now you'll notice that if we close out of this, it doesn't launch out of the, or close out of the rest of the application. It just brings us back to the home interface here. Now along with this, we don't have the persistent data working yet, but we're working towards it. So we currently have computer generated accounts that allow us to log in and just show off some of the usability of the application. Now if I hit login here, it'll bring us to our main menu. This is where one of the biggest goals for this sprint took place, and that's with adding and creating this main menu task list for users. This is the main way we believe users will want to look at their tasks, just in a straightforward list that's easily and quickly viewable. We think this is an appealing style for the users who we think are going to use this application, and that's students and people with really kind of flexible schedules that have meetings maybe some weeks, maybe they don't others, classes, homework, just a lot of changing things for their week. So this took a while for us to implement, and although it doesn't quite work yet with user created data, it currently uses a script that runs within the application to create the data. We still think it was a major leap forward because it showed that we could build this interface that will allow users to view their data. Now I'm getting a little repetitive, so I'm going to move on to the next major improvement to our interface and to our front end, and that's with this create button here. This is how users in the future will be able to add in their own tasks and event to the calendar. These events will eventually be shown here and with some of the other interfaces that I'm going to get into. But these are the 4 main categories that we thought would be useful to our user group. So once again, that's like students and people with flexible schedules. Just short things: the event name, the due date, so like the date of the event, the time of the event, the place of the event. These are the 4 main things that we really thought were important. And you'll notice, of course, it's the 4 same things that we have up here within our main task list. We eventually want to be able to sort by these things alphabetically by name and, of course, by date. But that's for a later sprint. Now you notice, once again, if you close out of this, this continues to stay up. These are just part of the small improvements we made, along with changing some of the text on the buttons to make the application more easy and usable for most of our user groups. Now you'll notice one of the big things that we added here was the graphical representation of a monthly calendar, and that's viewed within here. So if I open this, this was done using a JavaFX jar file that we downloaded and implemented into our application. You'll notice this shows a current up-to-date calendar for the month of February, even highlighting the specific day of the month that it is. This is pulled from the actual calendar, so it's always up to date. It's pulled from the computer, excuse me. Now we added this same create button here that is within our main task list here. This was something we thought was important because users will be using both the task list itself and the calendar list, and we wanted users to not have to switch between windows, just be able to add in their own events. Now the reason why we created the calendar interface in the first place is because we thought it was a good way for users to view their tasks and explore them in a way that seemed user-friendly and easy to understand. Most similar applications have something similar to this, so it seemed like an important component. Now, other than some of the smaller stuff, like I mentioned before, changing some of the button text, this was the majority of the front-end changes we made to our application. So just to kind of end this video, I'm going to be going into the actual code that makes this thing tick. Now to do that, I'm just going to jump through our sprint number 2 task goals right here and just kind of jump around and explain why we built things the way we did, as well as some of the problems we faced. So like I said, one of the biggest tasks for this week was creating this graphical task list interface within our main menu that will allow users to view all their tasks in a quick, organized, and efficient way. Now this definitely was our biggest problem, or caused us the most problems and issues during our build process, because getting this to line up the way we wanted it to and bring in the information was a tough task. Now I'm just going to jump right into the code of this. To create the actual fake information itself, that shows off the functionality of the interface, so this name 0, time 0, place 0, that's done within this event list, excuse me, this event list here. Now this creates an array that then generates all of these random dates and variables, as well as the time names, the place names, and that is brought in here through the event control, which then passes it even further into the main menu UI. Now real quick, this is just the actual UI itself built within the interface built to our NetBeans. Here's the source code. So this is where the information is caught and then brought and set within the actual task list here. You'll notice it's set as uneditable for users because we don't want them editing it directly in here. Furthermore, within this is the actual button functionality. So you'll see these buttons that allow the task creation UI to be visible, as well as the monthly UI viewable here to be visible, and those were just big elements as part of finishing navigation control between interfaces and making improvements towards better usability. We did face some problems with getting those buttons and the interfaces to work properly when closed, but we eventually got everything working. So next is this graphical representation of a monthly calendar, which I mentioned earlier. That's this right here, and that was done by bringing in this jar file from JavaFX and then implemented through this monthly UI, which calls both the creation button here as well as the actual calendar here into visibility. Along with that, we also created this interface to input a new task, and that's shown within both the task view list here as well as the monthly UI, because we think users will want to be able to do that no matter what interface they're viewing at that time. And so that's done through this create UI here. You'll see the design of the element as well as the actual functionality of the buttons, and some of the buttons we'll be adding in the future right here. So right above that was the creation of the new user account UI. and that's viewable right here. Here's the actual design within the NetBeans interface builder, as well as the source code that allows the UI to run and the new user button to be brought up and then sent to the login control after the account has been after the account is being authenticated. That is then brought to the main menu UI, which was explained a little more in depth in our last sprint, but basically our main interface here. And then lastly, just real quick, these final finishes towards usability. That was kind of editing some of these button labels themselves to make them more bold so users could see it, or make it stand out to users more easily, something we thought would be good for the efficiency of users. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the navigation control between interfaces, which takes place here and sends a lot of the buttons functionality that allows users to move between these interfaces, allows it to function. So yeah, these 6 things were kind of the major things we accomplished during our sprint. I hope you've found this walkthrough useful, and thank you for watching.